Meeple Nation Podcast, episode 478, Stars of Akarios.
Welcome, citizens, to Meeple Nation. Grab your favorite beverage, pull up a chair, warm up those dice, and join us at the game table as we discuss board games and the board gaming world. Each week, the hosts of Meeple Nation share their love for board games and the amazing memories that come from playing games with some very outstanding people. Let us now join our hosts in their natural habitat, the game table.
We are the hosts of Meeple Nation. I'm Nathan Howard.
I'm Dave Holliday.
I'm Logan Howard.
I'm Andy Holliday.
And I'm Douglas Stewart. The Meeple Nation podcast is sponsored by GameToppersLLC.com. And I have to tell you, this sponsorship, the relationship that we have with Game Toppers and with Berkey, I think it's kind of a source of pride for all of us because Game Toppers really are a product that we believe in. We use them. They go everywhere with us. You know, we talked about it when we mentioned Hug a MeepleCon a while back, but we had 5 of them gathered in one place. We had 3 Mycrofts in the basement and 2 Watsons upstairs, and people gathered around all of them. And what's so fantastic about these tables is that they take an existing space and just enhance it in such a beautiful and simple way. You've got an existing table, throw one of these over the top of it. They come in all kinds of sizes, and you've got a beautiful recessed playing surface that you can attach all kinds of wonderful things to. Cup holders, dice towers. They've even got a little inlay in them for holding cards. Tons of amazingly beautiful mats that go down inside of them that are themed and feature art by some of the industry's leading artists. And if you want to make it more of a permanent structure in your game room, you can get leg kits. They've got dining leaf covers. It's awesome because they can solve a simple problem or they can be a full solution with a whole range of accessories and products to go with it. So if this is something that you're interested in, if you want to enhance your game night in a whole variety of different ways, go check out GameToppersLLC.com.
While you're on the internet, spinning your wheels, letting those fingers fly, cracking those knuckles, and finding all the adventurous websites that are out there, not those websites, these websites. While you're doing that, take a gander at meeplenation.com. We have a ton of resources that you can peruse. We have our blogs that talk about a wide variety of subjects and gives you a little bit of insight into maybe some of our personality that doesn't make the air. We have our bios that talk about how we all kind of came into the hobby. We have our email. You can email us at meeplenation@gmail.com. Tell us about a game that should be on our radar that may not be. Tell us about an episode that you've liked, or tell us about an episode that made you laugh, one that made you cry, one that had somebody that sounded like Sean Connery in it. That was dumb. Anyways, there is a wide variety of options to spin those fingers on, and I don't know why every time I say spin those fingers, my fingers do the jazz hands. It's kind of fun. But anyways, while you're there, we also have a link to our Patreon page. We love our Patreons. We appreciate those who support the podcast. We appreciate everybody who listens to the podcast, but we have a very special appreciation to those who give us some support. This allows us to enhance the podcast in a wide variety of ways. If you would like to be a Patreon, we would love to have your support. Just join us on that link that is found on our webpage, or you can look for it on Patreon at Meeple_Nation and join us there. We are the hosts of Meeple Nation. I'm Nathan Howard.
I'm Dave Holliday.
I'm Andy Holliday.
And I'm Douglas Stewart.
And this week, we are talking about one of our new favorite space-based science fiction games called Stars of Akarios, designed by Brendan McCaskill and Jonathan Thwaites. This is a campaign-driven game for 1 to 4 players that lasts anywhere from 30 to 120 minutes. And it's published by Out of My Mind Board Games. Stars of Akarios is a narrative-driven, cooperative campaign game set in the Akarios galaxy. Throughout Stars of Akarios, you will fight in epic space battles, upgrade your ship, and explore the fringes of space. Stars of Akarios is built upon 4 core pillars of gameplay: space combat, world exploration, space exploration, and player progression.
Nailed it.
Each pillar, lost my place.
Works together.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
To create an unified and epic sci-fi board game experience.
I really can't find it. There we go. Each pillar works together to create a unified and epic sci-fi board game experience.
This game is wonderful.
Yeah, it really is. I was looking at this game. I found this on, I believe it was Kickstarter. It was one of the crowdfunding sites. And it just looked awesome. And I had kind of heard it compared to Gloomhaven in space. And at the time, I was super into Gloomhaven. And so I started looking into it, and I just, everything about it. You talk about those 4 pillars, all of that exploration, this idea that you are kind of docked at your ship, and then your mothership, and then you go out and participate in these dogfights in your starship. And then you have almost kind of like away missions, where your pilots have to go down and explore the planet's surface and all this stuff. And I was just looking at it, and I was like, this just looks awesome. And so I went ahead and backed it. It came in the mail, and it came during a time when I had a lot of games coming in. And so I, just got put on the shelf of shame. And I've kind of mentioned this before, but I just sat down one Sunday afternoon, and I looked at the shelf, and I just said, okay, I need to pull a shelf of shame game off and learn it and dive in. And so I chose Stars of Akarios because I was thinking I had a spare table off to the side where I usually set up games for myself that I'm just kind of working through. And I thought, okay, well, that'd probably be a good one. I'll sit down, I'll punch it, learn it, get it all set up, and start playing it, and that'll go on my side table. Well, 5 or 6 hours later, after I'd punched it and learned the rules and started playing through the prologue, I think I'd played through the first 5 or 6 missions. And it just kind of blew me away. I loved it. The thing that just captivated me more than anything else with this game was those space dogfights. And I think we'll talk about that, more in the podcast here. But I love that, and it is incredibly cinematic. And I know we overuse that word sometimes, but it really is a wonderful cinematic experience to have all these ships out on the board. And you can just imagine them pulling off these maneuvers. I mean, that's what you do. You have to roll dice, and you assign them to pull off maneuvers and make attacks. And just the way that it all comes together and culminates gives you this really kind of epic space battle feel.
You're not wrong. And that's my 2 cents. No, so in this game, as far as the story goes in this game, each of us plays a cadet. We're just about to graduate from the Akarios Institute pilot training program when our planet gets attacked. The cool thing is there is a lot of progression, right? A lot of development of your character as we normally talk about in these types of games, right? But it's a little different being a pilot, and much of it is space-based, and in particular, piloting-based. Not only do you, as the pilot, progress, but also your ship has the ability to progress.
Well, what I liked about it is from the get-go, you are presented with decisions that can affect the game that you make as a group, and it will affect, from what it seems like with what we've played so far, is it'll affect sometimes positively or negatively how we start the next mission. It could even affect what's available to us as we're exploring space. I think that's awesome that your decisions actually matter in the game, that it's not linear. There's a spider web of story, and you're just kind of exploring through that. And it seems like it's going to be a big game and a long campaign, which I don't have a problem with. But it also seems like it might have a high replayability if you ever get the time to get it to the table again and play through it again. I think that's awesome.
Let's be honest. You said you don't have a problem with.
Yeah.
I think there's probably a better term, more honest, accurate term.
Okay, I love that.
Okay.
You mentioned that a decision may affect your next mission, but some of the decisions were 2 or 3 missions down the way.
Right.
That factor or that choice came into play then, and we're kind of like, oh, well, it didn't really matter what we did, and all of a sudden, boom, oh, well, you chose to disobey this, or you chose to obey that order. Well, this is the consequence that comes with that, and how do we, what disadvantage or advantage do we start with that? I think that's great, because we talk about comparing this game to Gloomhaven, where Gloomhaven doesn't really have that. So Gloomhaven lightly has that, where, okay, well, if you make this decision, then these scenarios aren't available to you, or if you make this decision, this is the scenario path that you're going to go down. This one we're not that deep into it, so it may have branches like that. But in the scenarios that we're playing through, it says, well, if you chose this decision, if you chose to obey this order, then you read this part, or if you chose to disobey the order, then you read this part. And and that was 3 scenarios later that was actually coming into play. And I really liked that a lot.
Yeah. And one of the things that I liked about it too is that those decisions that you're making, some are big and some are small. Some will cut avenues of gameplay off to you in the future, but unlock new ones. And some are as simple as like, hey, this mission's about to begin. This is what's going on. What's your priority? Are you here to go after the enemy first? Are you here to save civilians? Are you here to do X, Y, or Z? And then depending on the choice you make is going to determine just some immediate stuff right there for that mission. Some of the decisions you make may earn you a lecture from your mothership captain. I forget her name off the top of my head, but
Captain Soma.
Soma, that's right. The way that those decisions play out in future comes in a variety of different ways. It's not just, okay, you made this decision, this is locked, this is unlocked. It's not a strictly linear thing. It feels more like a true choose your own adventure because those decisions may unlock just dialogue. They may unlock perks. They may be whole missions. It could be a whole bunch of different things.
Not only that, I really like the decisions that you're presented with because in a lot of these games where you have, oh, here's the decision, usually there's an obvious thing that this is the obvious thing that we need to do. And it wasn't that way. It's almost like a moral dilemma that you're presented with. What are you going to do? And either way, it's like, gosh, I really want to do both of those things. And you have to pick one. Yeah. And it's great. I love that aspect where there's not an obvious path. Yeah, we need to do this. This is what's going to be most beneficial for us.
Yeah, more so than any other games that I can think of where you have to make choices like that. I felt that in this one is that it was a hard choice, and it was like, gosh, yeah, I don't, and I love the like you mentioned, Nathan, where it's like, yeah, it could be a couple of scenarios later, all of a sudden that comes back, and that just shows a lot of depth of thought that goes into the story, and I really hope that we continue to see that depth throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, it's really, really, I think, a lot of fun that way. While we're kind of talking about the story and this branching path and everything, I do want to make mention of maybe one of the things that I found a little bit lacking, and that was just the general writing, the writing in general, I guess I should say. And perhaps this really popped because when we played this game, it was the weekend we had gone to Icon and we played it almost for a whole day. But the day before we had been playing Oathsworn, which had a whole team of award-winning writers behind it. And I mean, just the writing, the style, the prose, everything is just really beautiful with Oathsworn. And perhaps just seeing those two things kind of compared back to back, pretty stark difference, right? Like the quality of writing in Stars of Akarios is not necessarily amazing, but it is highly functional. It definitely works.
So the interesting thing about that is, for me, Oathsworn, any of the other games where we have an app that kind of narrates and tells the story, I have a really hard time following and knowing what's going on in the story. But with Stars of Akarios, I actually was able to. But I think it was mostly because, like you mentioned, we played it at Icon. It was really loud, and we had the speaker on your tablet up as loud as it would go. Yeah. So every time we were to listen to something, all of our heads would almost hit the table. We were like down as low as we could get, and like just getting as close as we can. So I think it was just the extreme focus just to be able to hear stuff for me that did that. But
and so that was with Oathsworn,
right?
Because this didn't have an app.
This one we just read from the book.
Yeah,
Oathsworn
just
was
read this one
that we had with the tablet. But that's kind of my point, right? Like Oathsworn just had this incredible writing along with the incredible voice acted narration, whereas Stars of Akarios we were just kind of reading out of a book. But my point is just the writing in general, you could really tell between those two games was not nearly as good in Stars of Akarios. Now I will say that the story is good, right? The story hooked me. I want to explore what happens next. And they do a good job, even though it's a little cheesy, and I won't spoil it, but the kind of immediate thing that happens after the first mission or two, I can't remember what it is they do something really big and kind of shocking, and it sort of sets the story off on the trajectory that it goes down. But it was smart. It's smart writing. It hooks you in a way that is captivating and makes you want to explore what the story has to offer.
Going back to the dogfighting. First game that I played that had any sort of dogfighting style gaming was the first release of X-Wing, the X-Wing miniatures game. I thought that did a pretty good job, and I don't have any real complaints against that game, but I actually really enjoyed how the dogfight played out in the Stars of Akarios, and how you just didn't have a set of maneuvers that you could do. You had to roll the dice, and then what what dice you had available would allow you to select and pick which maneuver you were going to do, or if you could do that maneuver. And for me, that was a big highlight, is that it wasn't just I can just do whatever I want. You were a little bit more limited to what you could do. I don't want to say it was risky, but there was kind of a risk to it.
Not only that, the fact that as far as you mentioned the maneuvers, Nathan, I love the fact that that's something that we each picked. We each had a special maneuver that, I mean, there were duplicates of some of the maneuvers that were available, but it made it so that it wasn't obvious which way everybody was going to be moving on the board. And, you're going through it and you're in a situation, you're like, dang it, I wish I would have taken that other maneuver right now, because it would be super handy to be able to move in that certain way, but you don't have that engine that allows you to do that.
But it was cool how it gave everybody a very unique play style.
For sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
It's like, okay, we know that Dave is going to try to pull the flanking maneuver, right? And he's going to try to get into the middle of a bunch of stuff because he's got this really great pulse weapon that's going to hit a bunch of stuff within range. Or, Nathan's going to pull a burn and flip and try to get behind enemy ships so that he can use his really powerful, attack that'll do a bunch of damage to one target or whatever. And it gave every ship a very unique feel.
And that's the great part of it, right? Is that it encourages you to work together and to synergize those space battles and not leave one person by themselves to take all the damage.
What are you talking about, Andy?
You got through it.
He survived.
So, no, but one of the things that I really, really have enjoyed with this dogfight, it's not simple. I mean, just moving around the space field is not simple, right? You've got to really consider what's going on because of the dice, first of all. But then, it being a spaceship in outer space, right? Like, it's not like running around or walking around, right? Like, there are certain things that you can only do given these three spaces adjacent to you, right? Or whatever, right? Like, you can't just decide, okay, I'm going over here, like you can in most like dungeon crawls, for example. You can go, okay, I'm going to move here and do this. You're limited because of space.
Yeah, you have a real sense of actually trying to maneuver your ship into place to execute things. You've got to think about how everything's moving. You're right. It's kind of the cumbersome nature of piloting a ship versus I'm just going to walk over there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we compared this a little bit to Oathsworn because we'd played Oathsworn the night before. And I like the AI movement in Stars of Akarios, I think, more than I like how the AI movement for the monsters in Oathsworn. Still, every time we do that, just let you guys decide where they go because you have a greater understanding and it just kind of makes sense. And Oathsworn just kind of always leaves me with a big question mark of, now where's the bad guy going to go after this? But
yeah, and I get that. I really like the AI system in Oathsworn, but if we're comparing it, if we go back to Gloomhaven, and I don't want to overly compare it to Gloomhaven because they really are different games in so many ways.
Agreed.
But that would be more akin to the type of AI system in Stars of Akarios. So if you're familiar with the AI system in Gloomhaven, there's some similarities, but I think the AI system in Stars of Akarios is very streamlined and actually pretty simple. When it comes time for the enemies to do their thing, you just walk through a really simple logic chain on the bottom of the card, executing the abilities that are on the card, and that's it. You just do that ship by ship. They do their damage, you flip their modifier card, and that's it. And it works really well. Sometimes they pull stupid maneuvers and sometimes they pull really brilliant maneuvers, but it all kind of gives you that feel of the chaos of battle.
And I think that goes hand in hand with how each your ship is unique on the player side. I mean, we already hit on that. It gives you the feel of each pilot is unique. I mean, I guess kind of comparing it still to Gloomhaven, where each player has a unique cards and their abilities there, that your ship and its abilities are unique. The weapons you have, the shields that you have, all of that are unique and give your ship a little bit of a personality and give your character a little bit of a personality that is unique, that I feel is more customizable than other games out there, which shines for me.
Yeah, and I really like the way they do that because it's all laid out on your board right there in front of you. And your ship, like you said, it has some asymmetry in its hull and shield values, but then you have multiple slots for engines and cards that can slot in there with special maneuver abilities. Same with weapons and attacks. And then you've got multiple slots for tech upgrades. You've got ship specific powers and pilot specific powers. So you really have a lot of levers to pull when it comes to making a very unique ship that kind of caters to your play style and the types of things you want to do when you're playing the game.
Do you guys remember a while back that I said I would love for someone to design a game that was pirate themed, where you would have, sea battles, and then you go and do some adventure on an island or something like that? That's what this is, but space themed for me.
So awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome. Like we've talked about, you have the dog fights, but not only that, you go and do planetary adventures where it's like a typical dungeon crawl, right? But other than, you're not necessarily moving in each individual step you're taking like you do in a typical dungeon crawl. You're moving from area to area, but it still has that dungeon crawl feel and that adventure feel and that exploration that you get from a dungeon crawl, where you're exploring tiles and flipping things over and searching for things and trying to find loot or, treasure or whatever else, right? It still scratches that itch, and it's just space themed. It's just not the right theme for me, but it's still awesome.
Yeah. And I love how when we were exploring on the planet that it wasn't, it was more like Descent, the first Descent, where it was the map kind of built as you explored, whereas opposed to Gloomhaven or Jaws of the Lion or Imperial Assault, where boom, there's the map. You know which way it's going to go and what to expect. I personally really like the exploration of, we don't know what's in the next room. We don't know which way to go. We have no advanced information on that.
Yeah, because it's built by a deck of cards that just sits off to the side. And you have one, maybe two or three that you flip over to start with. And then as you explore, you flip those cards out and kind of unveil the map. So you get that real sort of fog of war sense as you're exploring and going through things.
Yeah. And I thought that was great. Something that really stuck out as a positive for me. And I look back at what I dislike about Imperial Assault. And that's one of the things, is it's just the map is there.
Yeah, so if players are familiar with a game like Destinies or Seventh Continent, right, the map constructs itself very much like those do. So you've just got those cards that come out. And I love that system. I also love that the away missions, they told a kind of compact, fun story, but they didn't overstay their welcome. Those away missions were pretty fast, right? You land, you go and explore, everybody's rolling dice, you perform a bunch of abilities, you do some upkeep stuff. You do have sort of a dialogue section from the book that you're reading as people do things, but it's not long-winded. It's just quick paragraphs, quick story updates, quick, this is what happened, here's what's going on. And then maybe toward the end, you get a little bit longer of a crawl to just kind of wrap it up with a nice bow, and you're on your way back to your ship to go get into the next fight.
Yeah, but
it's great.
It's quick like that, and which is great, and it plays quickly. But at least for me, I feel like the story still grabbed me.
Yeah,
I was still very much into what was happening on the board and what we were investigating, and there was still that intensity and a little bit of anxiety of what was going on. So I think it was well done, given the fact that it was fairly brief, right? I mean, it wasn't a very long, drawn out mission, yet I thought they did a great job with the story in it and pushing the storyline and adding all that flavor to it. I thought it was wonderful. Very well implemented.
Yeah, it was a highlight for me. I thought the story was put together well. And like you said, Doug, earlier, that it wasn't a long, drawn out, you got a short paragraph, read it, you explore some more, discover something, read on. For me, anyways, that was a big plus.
Yeah, because it feels like just quick punches of action rather than kind of a slog, which even games that I really love, like board game writers, they get really full of the story they're trying to tell. They feel like your play needs to be interrupted so they can tell you this long story. And it is such a lesson to me in good storytelling that just give the players some quick punches, some meat on the bones. Don't put too much fluff in there and just let them experience the story.
Yeah, sometimes less is more.
Yeah, 100%.
And that, as a creator, that's hard to do, right? You have a big epic story that you want to share. It's tough to limit that down to a paragraph.
Well, you think about campaign games, the kind of the purpose of it is that they were created in many ways because of role-playing games and the ongoing play style of a role-playing game. So you have a campaign game that's story-driven. But one thing I love about role-playing games is that the players make it their own. And so in this case where it's giving you bits and pieces to fill in what's going on, And then at that point, it lets the players tell the story rather than the game dictating as to what exactly happens and everything else. We get to decide what happens and what we do and how the story goes. It just fills in the gaps, which is great. It made me feel more invested in what was going on.
Yeah, I agree.
100%. I did want to take a quick moment and just mention the components. I actually really appreciate this game. I feel like they found a wonderful balance. If you buy the core box of this game, the ships and enemies and everything, they just come as standees. And then they have one bonus pack where you can buy, the plastic versions of everything. It's just like the Ships of Akarios expansion. That's pretty simple. It's not overproduced, but it adds a lot of, I think, punch to the game. I really enjoy the balance that they found, especially in today's world of these overwrought, overproduced Kickstarters. I appreciate that they didn't do that with this. They put just exactly what needs to be put into the box. You can have a great experience, and then just a little bit extra if you want to have, some plastic instead of standees at the table, and then call it good. And so it's a great production that's not overproduced. I think it's like the perfect balance, and it kept the cost of the game down. Because I definitely have games that are similar to this one in size and scope on the shelf that I paid a lot more for because the minis have a special wash on them, or, that came with some extra sleeves, or the dice have a marbled effect, or, whatever the case may be. And I feel like they found a really good balance with the production of this game.
Sometimes game designers know that we're suckers.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
So what did you guys think of the art on the game? Because when I first saw this game at Doug's house, when we were playing, I believe it was Oathsworn. We were playing Oathsworn, and I was perusing your shelves, and you had this on the top of your shelf, and this game stuck out, very much attracted my eye. I love the art. I mean, I love the sci-fi theme. That should not be a surprise to anyone, but just the art and the presence of the box really stuck out on your shelf to me and was very appealing. So I really enjoyed the art.
Yeah, I think the art's fantastic. I think that if you are really into space games, and in particular space exploration and combat, I think the artwork's phenomenal. Some of the art that I enjoyed the most actually was on those cards on the away mission when you're flipping over and you're kind of building out. In the one that we played, it was kind of a base that was in this sort of snowy landscape. I thought that it was awesome. But if you like that space theme, I think it's really going to hit. If space isn't really your thing, I don't know that it is super special art. I mean, there's definitely games I would point to that have art that I think is better. But yeah, it's really good.
I would agree with you, Doug. The art that stood out more to me was the away mission on the planet itself. Maybe because I appreciated the fact that the map wasn't very big. Like, you're playing on smaller cards, but yet there was a lot of fine detail on the artwork for those map cards, which, I mean, we're talking what I felt was a lot for how small it was. I very much appreciated that. I thought totally agree with you on the artwork. I didn't notice it so much on the space stuff other than the character artwork. I noticed it, but I very much did for the land missions.
Yeah, and I will say one of the cool things that they did was if you are going through the book that tells a story, they have some full pages that are just dedicated to story art. So you get to a certain point in the story that's a little more poignant or important, and they'll have like a full page spread. And it's kind of fun. You're going through the book, and then it's like, oh, by the way, check this out. This is what's going on. You hold it up to the group, and it's this really cool piece of art. Before we kind of share our final thoughts and wrap this episode up, I will make mention of one of my pet peeves. We've talked about it on the podcast before. This game commits the nearly unforgivable sin of not allowing enough room. And these have game trays. They're really nice, produced, fantastic game trays. Don't provide enough room in them for sleeved cards.
That drives me batty.
It's aggravating. And, there's enough room in the box. You can kind of move some things around. There's some extra space in the Ships of Akarios box. You can kind of move things around and you can get it all to fit, and it works. But just make that box a little bigger. Just think about sleeves when you're building these games. Designers and publishers have got to get better at this.
Yeah, when you're spending that kind of money on a game, they need to essentially assume that those cards are going to get sleeved. People are going to want that game and those cards to stay in pristine condition, and they're going to get sleeved. Bardsung was probably the worst offender of all of my games. There are so many cards in that game, and there is no space for any of them. I had to buy a card box specifically for it, just to hold all the cards after they got sleeved. So yeah, I'm with you on that. That drives me crazy when that happens.
Yeah. And I'm not an excessive card sleever. When listeners hear us talk about sleeving cards, some of them are going to roll their eyes because it's like, there are people out there that just don't sleeve anything, and that's totally fine. I'm not one of those people who sleeves every card that I get, but cards that are going to get shuffled a ton, and this game has decks of cards that are going to get shuffled a lot. I want to sleeve those cards to keep them, in decent playing condition. And when you don't include room in there for me to put those in the box after they're sleeved, it drives me batty.
Right. The cards shuffling, like you're mentioning, right? We talk about Gloomhaven and the similarities that it has. That's one of the things, right? Is the each player has a modifier deck for when you're in those space battles. And so
right.
You're going to be shuffling those a lot.
So a while back, we did an episode all about pet peeves. And we got an email from Paul Bedford, who is soon to be game designer of a game called Hunted by a God. But he made mention that he was very much interested in our feedback on pet peeves. And so, Doug, when you implore and beg designers to listen, that was something that Paul was very excited to hear and to take some of that advice. He says the journey of designing this has been a 5-year journey for him. And so to have something that give him kind of that feedback that, maybe that's something that we need to be well aware of, which is good to hear. And you're absolutely right that there's so many designers out there that, especially in a Kickstarter, when you provide sleeves in your Kickstarter, they better fit in your storage.
100%. That's the worst case scenario, right? When you have a Kickstarter that comes with sleeves as part of the pledge and it doesn't fit. Anyway,
or an add-on.
We're getting up on this soapbox in the middle of our Stars of Akarios episode, but yeah, it drives me crazy. That was the one big egregious thing that this game did. I sleeved the cards that needed to be shuffled. There wasn't room. I had to be creative about putting stuff in the box. Other than that, I think this is a phenomenal game.
Yeah. I think almost we're spoiled with these campaign-driven games with apps that read and have the voice acting, and the voice acting that's exceptional. We talked about Oathsworn, and we've mentioned in the past Forgotten Waters, which has an amazing audio and voice acting app that goes with it. I hate to say it's almost a requirement these days, but we're getting to the point where we're all a little bit spoiled that when a game doesn't have a voice acted narration app with it, it's almost like we didn't get the miniatures and we only have standees.
Well, I have some fun news for you, because this is not something that we talked about when we were playing and I haven't brought it up. There is an app in development for Stars of Akarios.
And you did mention that before.
And it has fully voiced narration for the entire book.
Yeah, and I am looking forward to that. My Father's Work was another game that when it was released, the app wasn't out and it didn't quite work. And I know, and I understand, and I get that that's kind of the challenge. And I would much rather have the game out and be able to sample it and dig into it than have the game halted for waiting for that completion. But it is nice to have that. And I think in today's gaming, that really is becoming almost a requirement for campaign-driven games, which is a challenge to designers, right? It's an added extra cost. It's an added extra stress for them. I totally get. But as table space becomes more digital and more, scarce, dare I say, because there's a wide variety of games that come out each and every year. So for your game to shine and to make it to my game table, it's either going to be really good or it's got to have some perks in it that is going to be more appealing. And digital content like that, narration, voice acting, and miniatures are part of that. And that doesn't necessarily make or break a game, but I'm excited for the Stars of Akarios narration app to come out.
We are spoiled though, and it does put an incredible onus on game developers because they're developing the game and then all of a sudden they have to become app developers and experts in the digital realm and learn how to publish and how to support apps and do a bunch of stuff that they didn't really originally intend or set out to do. And so bless their hearts. Really, we do appreciate the hard work that goes into these games, but for crying out loud, there's no excuse for not putting enough room in the box for sleeved cards. Sorry. Can't let that one go.
Preach on, brother.
So final thoughts on Stars of Akarios.
I love the game. I very much look forward to playing it again. It scratches all those Gloomhaven itches. Comparing that Gloomhaven and the new Frosthaven, which do I want to get to the table? For me, I personally very much want to get Stars of Akarios to the table again and again. I'm excited.
I really enjoyed it as well. For me, I think a large part of it is just having a game that continues with the same people over and over again. To me, that campaign is a big deal. And if this is one that we're going to like actually do and play and see the progress, absolutely. I hope to see a little bit more in the way of the exploration, right? I didn't love the planetary exploration. I'm hoping that it gets better. And there's also supposed to be space exploration, and so I'm looking forward to that as well.
I liked how it changed it up from a lot of campaign games. So you had your dogfights, you have where you're moving through space, deciding which direction you're going to go. You are kind of on a timeline, and then you have the planetary stuff as well. It breaks it up. It makes it so it keeps it fresh and interesting. And then by the time you finish with the planetary stuff, you're kind of ready for another dogfight. I kind of like that. I like the fact that everything seems a little bit new when you get into it, and you're not, okay, well, it's a little bit more of the same, and it totally breaks up that monotony. I think they've done a great job with that. I love being able to upgrade your ship with all sorts of different cool things. Any game that there's customization of your character to make it unique and make it your own, I am all on board. And I think they have done a great job in Stars of Akarios with that. Not only do you have your character, but you have your ship that you're making it your own and unique from the other ships. So it's a great game, and I've had a ton of fun with our play so far.
Yeah, and something we didn't talk about is as the game progresses, you can actually acquire multiple ships. So your pilot can upgrade multiple ships to kind of take on different styles of fight and everything else. There's a whole tech tree that we didn't mention. You can earn points toward earning tech and upgrading and doing a bunch of stuff. And then your mothership, your group sort of has an overall sheet that you can upgrade and do some stuff on too. So the depth of customization just is, I think, fantastic. I echo everything that you guys have said. I think mostly just spoken positive about it, and that's how I feel. I think this is a really wonderful game. Nathan, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head for me when you mentioned Frosthaven. I got Frosthaven out. I punched it. I was super excited to have another Gloomhaven type experience because I do really like Gloomhaven. And having played Stars of Akarios, it has basically taken all of my desire to play Frosthaven away. And I'm sure it will come back at some point, right? That's not to say Frosthaven isn't a wonderful game. I haven't played it yet, so I don't know. I'm sure that it is. But my desire right now is to just play Stars of Akarios.
And that says a lot about a game, right?
For sure.
Thanks for listening to our game experience with Stars of Akarios. We've had a lot of fun, and maybe one that you should check out if it sounds like it'd be fun to you.
If you've played it, let us know. Let us know your feelings and your experiences with it.
Until next time.
We'll see you going head to head in that space dogfight, shooting each other up, pew pew, at the game table.
Thank you for listening and being a part of Meeple Nation. If you would be so kind as to follow, subscribe, share, and rate or review this podcast, it really helps to spread the fun. You can be more involved in supporting the podcast by joining the nation at patreon.com/MeepleNation, or you can find a link at the top of our webpage, meeplenation.com. And while you're there, look at all our extra content. There are links to all our past episodes, a wide variety of blogs, pictures from our Instagram feed, and bios for all the hosts and our awesome bloggers. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, all under Meeple Nation. If you would like to chat with the hosts or other members of the nation, you can join our Facebook group, Meeple Nation Off Air. We hope to see you again at a game night, a con, or maybe a suspense-driven evening of Werewolf. Thank you for listening and supporting Meeple Nation, and stay tuned for next week's episode.
Thank you so much for listening. We very much want to thank our patrons who help keep the podcast running. I personally want to thank my co-hosts for all the help they provide with both content here on the podcast, in addition to what we have available on our website. Without them, the podcast would not happen. If you too would like to support the podcast, you can join the nation at patreon.com/Meeple_nation. Or you can find a link to Patreon at the top of our webpage, meeplenation.com. If you have any questions, comments, or games you feel should be on our radar, You can always reach us at meeplenation@gmail.com. We can't wait to hear from you. I am grateful to Doug and Andy who helped me edit episodes, and I want to thank James and Kim Clark who do the editing on our blogs and on our webpage, which can be found at meeplenation.com. We want to thank Brain Detergent for our music. If you want to find more from him, you can follow his links that can be found on our webpage or simply search for Brain Detergent on YouTube to find more of his tracks. Thank you again for listening and being part of the Meeple Nation community.
Got the black lung.
Meeple Nation Podcast, episode 478, Stars of Akarios.
This is the Stars of Akarios.
Akarios.
They help us enhance the help us. Whoa, probably should edit that one.
Yeah, don't use that word.
Yeah.
Yep, definitely. 5 minutes. Tag 5 minutes.
We lost Dave for a little bit. Let Dave catch his breath there.